I'm Ash. I am not a lawyer, and I am not licensed to practice law in your state.
I am Elle. I am also not a lawyer, and I am not licensed to practice law in any state, and we are not giving legal advice in this episode today. FYI.
FYI. But we are Lavi Cosplay.
And this is Shit Cosplayers Say. And the shit we're talking about today is when people try to own things in the cosplay community that they don't really own.
But it's mine.
It's mine. You can't sit with us. Gosh, this is such a problem.
This is such a problem. It's such an interesting topic, too. And obviously, there are some legit circumstances, and we'll get into this, but like, people get accused of stealing in the cosplay community all the time, which is just funny to me because, like, we are all, not all of us, but a lot of people who are cosplaying are portraying characters that are owned by other entities to begin with. And it's like, you use maybe this commercial sewing pattern for this licensed character, but what?
We're also just nerds in costume. I don't know why people take some of this stuff so incredibly seriously. I understand it for that small percentage that actually have a business when some of the things we're going to talk about today happen. But for the most part, when someone's getting accused of stealing, it's typically not something you can actually own because you don't have some of the legal paperwork done to physically own the thing.
If that's even possible, depending on what specifically we're talking about.
Right, because some of the stuff we're going to talk about, you can't really own. Like, there really isn't any way to get any legal jurisdiction over the thing because you can't own it.
Right. But usually if somebody is accusing somebody else of stealing, that means that maybe the cosplayer does actually own the intellectual property. Maybe they think that they own the intellectual property. For whatever reason, even when people aren't competing, cosplay is super competitive, especially in the social media game, which we kind of talked about a little bit in our imposter syndrome episode earlier this season. If people feel like their particular brand is being attacked, they might go on the defensive and say that they're being stolen or copied from.
You hear a lot about territory, especially in competing, where a cosplayer may feel like they own a certain convention or a certain contest. And so that kind of goes in this category too. Or a character, which you see a lot on social media as well, where a particular cosplayer feels that they own a character, and then if somebody else does it, they're like infringing upon their brand and their territory, which no.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and we also see it quite a bit with panels.
Yes.
Whether it be panel titles or panel concepts, you'll see this topic come up a lot for whatever reason.
This all kind of stems from how competitive cosplay has gotten in general. So whether you're actually competing in contests or not, that's not really where the competition portion of cosplay is seen anymore, in my opinion. Not that many people actually compete at a contest level anymore. They compete on social media. They compete in the hallway. They're competing for this level of status that they have in their head. It also goes with how much people want to make cosplay into a career nowadays. And I think that's where some of that competitiveness is driven from as well, because if you see someone else doing something similar to what you want to do and they're doing it better, you start to get scared because you also want to be able to do the thing.
Well, and it might not even be that they're doing it better, but just if they are also doing well.
Yes.
Some people see that as threatening.
Yeah, instead you should be like networking with other person who's doing well and doing like collaborations rather than being worried because cosplayer A is doing well that you as cosplayer B can't also do well. Because we're all different people.
Yes.
The same character one gets me all the time though.
So, Elle, what is intellectual property?
Intellectual property refers to any creation of the mind, literary and artistic works, designs, symbols, names, and images. You can't actually own anything unless you have a copyright, trade secret, trademark, or a patent. Our information that we have following comes from uspto.gov, but we are actually going to go over a little bit about what is a trademark, a copyright, a trade secret, and a trade secret. Most of you are never going to touch one of these unless you have a business. So you're typically not going to bother unless you have some sort of business or intellectual property that you need to be able to protect. So our cosplayers like Kamui Cosplay or Kinpatsu probably have some of these on some of their work because it is their business. But your standard everyday cosplayer isn't going to have most of the legal binding versions of these.
Well, and frankly, a lot of these are expensive and I wouldn't want to pay for them.
Yeah, a trademark with a lawyer is around $4,000 in the United States. Copyright actually isn't that bad and is probably worth doing if you have consistent media that you want to protect. But we'll talk about copyright in a second and how that's kind of an automatic thing anyway. But the trademark is the more expensive one, and that's typically used for a good or a service. So it's the identity of the good or service. So this is protection of a brand name. That's going to be your trademark. So it might not be your business's legal, like, LLC or something of that nature. It's going to be like Oreo. You know, they're made by Hibisco. Hibisco's the business, Oreo is trademarked. So that kind of a thing. This guards against counterfeit and fraud, but there are a lot of wiggle rooms due to free use in the United States. The trademark doesn't mean that you can legally own a particular word or phrase. What it means is that you prevent others from using it that are also in the same category of goods or service. So let's talk about Oreos, because that's just what I must be hungry and wanting cookies, because Oreos are what I'm thinking of right now. Let's say another cookie brand wants to name their cookie Oreo. They can't do that, right? But let's say a soap wants to call their soap the Oreo. Soap and cookies are not in the same category of product. So that soap company potentially could get away with it. Now, they probably wouldn't because Oreo's a really big company. But as far as how that concept works, they're not in the same type of business.
Right.
So you have that wiggle room.
Oreo, the cookie, is going to be different than, like, Oreo, the auto repair shop.
Right. Like, if somebody's last name is Oreo and they have Oreo Auto Repair, like, that's a completely different thing, you know? Not the same as the cookie.
Not the same. There is no confusion as to whether or not your car repair services have anything to do with cookies.
It could. I mean, if Oreo decided to make an Oreo scented soap, then I guess... Well, then they would have claim within that product category. So I used to deal with this a lot when I worked in on-camera commercial, where if somebody had a booking in, say, baked goods, and then a casting call came up within baked goods, I couldn't send them to that casting call because they already had a booking in baked goods, for instance. So, like, it kind of works the same thing with the trademarks. It was also really complicated because you had to remember who had what commercials already.
It's like that very well-known gentleman from the cell phone commercials couldn't work for both companies at the same time, but eventually ended up switching.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yep. I mean, I wasn't going to say it, but...
That is a common phrase that you cannot trademark.
It is. People say it all the time.
So basically what the trademark's going to do is it's going to apply if someone tries to directly use your logo for a similar business within the same category. So for cosplay, this could be a problem if, like, someone has a very specific process, very specific goods, and someone tries to copy it directly. That's where the trademark might come in handy. If someone's copying somebody else's logo, that's usually where you're going to see this. So a trade secret kind of works like a patent, where it's on the process itself. It's a little bit complicated. This probably isn't going to get used much in, like, a cosplay-related field.
There are no secrets in cosplay, let's be honest.
Right. But basically, this piece of work has to have value to others where they can't obtain that information.
Like, this would be more so for, I would say, like, manufacturers of goods that you make cosplay out of. So let's say Company X comes up with this super unique method of making EVA foam that's different from what everybody else does to make EVA foam. That could be considered a trade secret.
And at that point, you would just go get a patent because it's actually going to protect you more than the trade secret is.
Yes. But, I mean, that would be something that people wouldn't be able to get legitimately from you.
Yes.
Like the secret recipe for Colonel Sanders fried chicken.
Exactly. That is a trade secret. So what is a copyright? So a copyright is what we're probably most familiar with. But this protects original works of ownership and can include words, numbers, pictures, graphics, video, audio, symbolic media. Published and unpublished works. So the second your work is created, you have a copyright. But depending on how you have put that time and date stamp to your work depends on how well it's going to hold up in a court of law. So, like, every time we upload an episode, we automatically have a copyright. It also has a date and a timestamp, and it's actually a pretty well-held copyright because of that.
The one that I used to see all the time that I know that authors and composers were using back before digital media was a really big thing was that they would send themselves a sealed copy through the U.S. Postal Service because then it would have a date from the post office on the sealed envelope. So if they ever needed to go to court to uphold their copyright, they would take the sealed envelope and open it in front of the judge.
Artists do that a lot with prints, too, where they'll send a print of their work to themselves and leave it in an envelope. Because then if you've got a print that's timed and stamped before somebody else had it, well then, you're good to go. So, like, when you upload something to Facebook or Instagram, it kind of has its own copyright, too. But that's harder to prove due to how you can, like, manipulate photos and steal people's photos. So that one gets a little harder, but we see that a lot where people steal people's artwork online and then post it to their own social media.
My favorite thing that has to do with art theft is when the bots will look for items to put on t-shirts.
Yes!
And
that's my favorite game.
They will make fake ones that say this web page steals artwork and then have all their friends comment on it. Man, I would really love this on a t-shirt. And then it shows up.
Yes.
They also really like to put Disney characters on them because, you know, the mouse is really good about protecting their copyright.
That's right. So your copyright's going to be more protected if you actually do a registered copyright, which gives you a public record and provides you more protection. It's actually not terribly expensive. So if you do have something that's really important to you, and this can be videos and audio and things like that. So let's say you created this really awesome tutorial and you want to make sure that it's super protected, you could get a registered copyright on it. And that would give you more pull if someone, like, stole your video. But again, if it's not the exact video, you may not have a lot of wiggle room. So, but how do we know if someone actually owns something? Because as you've probably been able to tell, 99% of the time when these arguments happen, the person doesn't own jack.
this comes up a lot anyway. If you're thinking about doing something and you're thinking about naming something a certain way, or if you're thinking about something that you want to try, the first step, and really they should pay us for saying this much, your first step should be go to Google and look for it. If somebody's using it as a panel name, I bet there is a web version of a panel programming book somewhere that has panel names in it that will show up in your search engine when you type that in. If you want to know if somebody else has done a panel on XYZ, you can look at program guides. I usually look at least for the con that we're considering submitting to, back when we were doing more generic panels before we started coming up with kind of our own unique spin on things. Be like, hey, is somebody already doing a masquerade panel at XYZ Con? Or you can look at other cons in the area and be like, what's a hole that I need to fill? You know, what's going to benefit everybody where I'm not necessarily doing something that somebody else is already covering, but I want to bring something new and exciting. Just use your Google Foo.
Well, the other thing that you have to look at too is if you're thinking, this might be a problem, maybe don't do it. You could just not do it, because if you know that somebody's already doing it and you choose to do it anyway and then they get mad about it, I mean, yeah, part of that's on them, but part of that's on you, depending on the circumstances. If you're in the middle of a tutorial that you're creating and you think it's too much like someone else's tutorial, and you're wondering if it's like someone else's tutorial, and you're getting concerned that it might be too close to someone else's tutorial, that might be a red flag that it's too close to someone else's tutorial.
Right, because you don't necessarily have to make a new tutorial. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you really like somebody's tutorial, you could just share it.
Well, now the reinventing the wheel usually comes from wanting the social media presence that comes from releasing the tutorial. So that's also, if you're already pretty sure it's not new info, that's typically what the desire is for the end result. The desire from the behavior is that you will get more people coming to your social media thinking that tutorial concept belongs to you.
Right. And if you're making them pay for it, that makes you an extra large asshole.
That's true. So what can you actually own besides a tutorial if you do copyright it? Fan designs. This happens constantly where people steal fan designs from other people. You see it all the time.
Yep.
Yes, the original artist owns them. You cannot claim them as yours. But it happens constantly.
Well, and it's really easy. You just say, I made this costume designed by so-and-so.
Exactly. It's that easy. It gets tricky because a phrase or a tagline can sometimes also be owned by a entertainment presence, essentially. But it may not actually be trademarked or copyright, so that gets a little tricky. If you feel like you're stealing something from someone else, or if somebody comes to you and there seems to be a misunderstanding, just stop. Because it really, in the end, there's nothing legally they can do unless they've trademarked, like, a phrase. The first phrase, comes into my head, like, Urkel. Urkel says, did I do that? Well, you can't actually own that, but...
That's a question. But yeah.
Another actor started playing a very similar character using a very similar phrase. That company probably would have had something to say about it.
Well, and not to mention the fact that the internet would have exploded.
Or if it's, a lot of times it's like a business tagline will sometimes bring this up too.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it as well. And that's actually trademarked.
Yes,
so
Nike.
That's actually trademarked. They've trademarked that phrase. They own that phrase. So there are certain crafting techniques that are specifically owned by those cosplayers. And it's well known that those cosplayers own those techniques. And that kind of goes with copywriting a specific tutorial. But the one that comes to my head all the time is Kinpatsu's high ponytail tutorial. It's a very interesting concept, and I've seen a lot of people do knockoffs of it. From my understanding, she's the first one who really came up with that specific format. No, I'm not going to tell you what she does, because you should just go buy her tutorial, because it's very well done. But I've seen a lot of people, like, release something very similar going, I discovered this really unique ponytail way to do a ponytail. And it's like, no, she's been doing that forever. Not quite. And some people, they do it, they don't realize that. Like, they came up with something, not realizing that someone else was already doing it, which does happen.
They say this about literature all the time. Like, there are only so many finite number of stories, and the rest of them are all being told and told again. It is possible for two separate people to have the same unique idea. But unless you came up with it first, there's no real way to prove that you were not influenced by the other person's work in some fashion.
Well, and then there's the concept of a branded name. So a branded name doesn't always have a trademark, and it doesn't always need a trademark. So sometimes it just matters how long it's been around. The story that I always think about is when Lady Antebellum wanted to change their name to Lady A, and the singer had already been using it for like 10 years, but she didn't have an official trademark, but they ended up paying her like $10 million to get the name Lady A anyway, because she had been using it for so long, to give her the opportunity to like rebrand and do all those things. So that would be kind of like if someone decided to do a panel or a podcast called Shit Cosplayers Say, and it was very, very similar to what we already do. It would be like, You also use a Jeopardy board and do XYZ. Yes, people have tried. It hasn't worked so far. People have tried to steal it. It has not worked. But we will talk about why it doesn't really matter if someone steals your panel. So what happens when someone believes they own something, but they really don't, which is 99% of these cases?
Yeah, because the character concept, we were talking about that earlier. So nobody, unless you actually created a character or a specific design, like, you do not own it. Now, I have seen people commission designs. Zach Fisher Illustrations is the one that comes to mind first. He does a lot of WoW designs. Project Ebon Blade was a huge project for BlizzCon a couple years ago. Still see a lot of those pop up. And then actually the Crown Championships winner in 2020, Jinx Kitty, her priestess costume was artwork that was commissioned by Cinderis, who also does cosplay design commissions. Now, in that particular instance, those people do own those designs because they created them and or commissioned them. So that artwork was made specifically for them to make that. But other than that, I mean, if I want to cosplay Sailor Moon and you want to cosplay Sailor Moon, neither of us own Sailor Moon. Everybody can cosplay Sailor Moon just fine. It's not the end of the world.
We've all seen some of the big fusses that have happened on social media where a particular social media person thinks they own a specific character and then are trying to claim that other people stole the character from them. And it's always some really popular character, too.
I am clutching my pearls.
I know. It's never like an unknown character either. It's always someone like Nightwing or Sailor Moon or something like that. And it's like, no.
I'm thinking of a particular well-known character or particular well-known cosplayer. I won't mention them by name and the character, where they actually did a cosplay of a character and then claimed it was their OC. I don't know if you remember seeing this a couple years ago. Let's be honest, the internet had a field day because it's the internet and everything lives forever, but you don't own that character. It's not a thing.
You also can't own a common phrase, which I've seen people try to do, which I think is hysterical. You can't stop someone from using a common phrase. Like, we can't stop some other podcast or cosplay group or panel from saying, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. We can't.
That phrase has been around probably longer than we're alive.
Right.
So, I mean...
Like, we can't stop you.
Murphy's Law.
We can't stop you from using that. We can't stop you from using just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yep.
It's
common phrase.
It's just a thing you can't do. Like, we could attempt to trademark, but frankly, something that common, they don't usually let you trademark anyway. Someone trying to trademark something like that would be a really asshole move anyway.
Yes.
I'm trying to think there was some company that was trying to trademark something really simple, and I don't remember what it was.
I know at some point somebody tried to trademark the hashtag.
Yes! That's one of the ones I'm thinking of. You can't trademark the hashtag. Like,
what if I don't call it a hashtag? What if I call it a pound sign?
a pound sign. Number sign. Throw it way back.
Yeah.
We're showing our age right now.
Are we?
We also mentioned Urkel, so
Yeah.
yeah.
All these kids are going to be, they're not going to know what Family Matters is.
That's okay, doesn't matter.
It's all right. It's a TV show.
It's an
from
old
back in the day.
TV show from like the late 80s, early 90s. Skit concepts. So this one's rough.
Yeah.
Technically, there's nothing you can do, but it's a really dick move.
It's a super dick move. And we've actually seen it where people have legit, like, copied other people's skit concepts to the point where it was, like, painfully obvious.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we saw one where, like, and they did it for the same competition, too, which was really shady. But they literally copied this other person's skit from, like, a couple years before.
Again, the internet is forever, so...
If a contest finds something like that out, you will typically get disqualified. Because it's just not cool.
You can talk to the
Right.
person that developed the skit and say, hey, so I really liked this, and I was thinking about incorporating XYZ. And a lot of times, people are cool with it because you're going to put your own spin on it anyway. And then you could be like, hey, cosplay contest that I'm entering, parts of this skit were inspired by XYZ, who gave me permission to use those elements.
Yeah, don't lie to your judges and say you self-choreographed your entire performance, and then the judges notice in about the first, like, few seconds that it's an America's Got Talent performance. That one.
Yep. Yeah.
Don't do that. That's happened. Don't do that.
That has happened.
We're gonna know.
Yeah. I've had a couple of those happen where they've actually legit done full on dance choreography from something else, and they're like, oh no, this was all me.
Well, and that's the thing is, if they would have said, oh, we used America's Got Talent, it would have been like, oh, okay.
Yeah, don't lie to me. Like, you can say that, hey, by the way, you know, I watched this and I thought it was cool and maybe I changed a couple things, but don't 100% claim that you did something. We've talked about that in competition pieces before. Don't say you did it if you didn't. Don't lie to your judges.
Probably one of the most popular and problematic things that happen is believing they are the only person that can do a particular panel subject. You will see this around introduction to cosplay panels, masquerade panels, and certain character Q&As.
I was going to say, I've definitely seen this happen with the Ask the panels.
Where they feel like they're the only group that can do this particular panel, or they're the only group that can do this panel at this particular convention because they've always done it. That's a very common occurrence at conventions.
It's a very common misconception.
Yes, and we've had this happen too, where we found out that someone else is doing a panel that is surprisingly similar to one that we've also done.
That we knew that they attended.
That we know that they've seen before. Like, that's happened, and you're kind of like, oh, but I guess imitation is, like, the sincerest form of flattery. I guess. But really, you can't do much unless they've literally copied your panel. Like,
well, and even then, there's very little that you can do.
You know, most of the time it's going to be a spin-off of a similar subject, or they may just have picked a similar subject. We have actually had our panel, word for word, panel for panel, legit stolen before.
Yes.
And it was a really bizarre experience. Because we
Yes.
were there.
When it
it
happened.
happened. We went to the panel.
We went to the panel, and some of the panelists were not in on it, and so they are attempting to figure out what some of our slides meant, and they were confused. It was great.
Yes. Be aware that if you submit a panel to a convention department, they may just reuse it without your permission and not tell you.
Yep.
Yeah. We know now. I did feel bad for the panelists, though, because they had obviously not been given the panel beforehand, so they had no clue what they were, like, going through. But that is a legit situation where a panel was actually stolen, and we just went, whatever, I don't care. It wasn't going to be worth causing a fuss about. Like,
no, it wasn't. And ultimately, it was a good panel, and the people that were sitting in the panel needed the information, so we just happened to provide it for them, and they didn't know.
That's right. We just happened to provide them with our lovely panel without them knowing that we'd provided them with our lovely panel. So it's all good.
Less work for us.
Well, and that kind of goes with owning a particular panel title, which is the other one you're going to see all the time. All the time. People get so bent out of shape because they think they own a title.
Anything with the word 101 in it.
Yeah, you can't. So, things you can't own. Cosplay Q&A. Cosplay tips and tricks. Cosplay 101 or anything with 101 in it. Masquerade Q&A. Anything that's X Q&A. If it's a generic title, you can't claim any ownership to it.
A beginner's guide too.
Like, if it's a very generic title, you are not going to be able to claim any ownership. It's the same with a panel. If it's a very generic common topic, you aren't going to be able to claim any ownership of it.
If it sounds like your panel title is a generic knockoff school textbook on your topic, then you probably do not have a unique enough panel title.
No, probably not. And if it's a panel that's done at every convention across the country and the world, you cannot get pissy if someone else is also doing it, because every convention has a cosplay tips and tricks, an armor panel, a sewing panel, a wig panel, a masquerade panel, every single con. You can't own it. Every con has one. Sit down. Like, it's just funny because people get so up in arms about it. And it's just like, you can't own a panel topic. You can't own a panel title. Like, if it's that generic, there's nothing you can do about it. And I know Ash mentioned, like, yeah, it's kind of respectful to go look at the schedule if you can find it from the year before, see if somebody else typically does it. But to be perfectly honest, you snooze, you lose. If I submit a masquerade panel and you submit a masquerade panel and the con decides they're going to take mine, do better? I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
The flip side of that is, whenever I think about that for me specifically, is if I'm trying to find something where I want to reach the broadest number of people, I don't want to be a duplicate on a schedule. And I would rather bring something new and exciting to the con. But as you mentioned, if, cosplayer A and cosplayer B both happen to submit a panel on the same topic and one gets chosen over the other, or both of them get chosen, like, nobody can be mad. That all has to do with the scheduling department and your relationship with the convention. If you've been running the same panel at this con for years and your programming department decides not to book it, or if they decide that they want to book something else that is blatantly going to be very similar in concept, that has 100% to do with you and nothing to do with the people that submitted the other panel. Because that's your relationship with the convention, that's your relationship with the programming staff and how well they feel that your panel has done in the past. Or it could just happen to be maybe there wasn't enough other quality programming that they wanted to put in, so they decided to have two of the same topic as opposed to having a whole or having something that they thought was going to be subpar. I mean, as long as they're not on the same date and time, I mean, who cares?
I mean, we've had that happen multiple times, and it's not a big deal. Because in the end, your panel isn't Like, what makes your panel, and what makes your panel good isn't the title or the subject or the topic. It's you and how you present your panel and what you give to your audience. Not the fact that you're doing a tips and tricks panel.
Yes.
That's why we ultimately don't worry when people steal our stuff, because it's not going to matter. They're not us. It's not going to be the same. Or they're not going to offer the same things because they are not the same people as we are.
They're not us. They do not have our particular experiences. They do not have our particular mannerisms, way of speaking, sense of humor, etc. Like, nobody can run a panel exactly the same way that we do because they are not us. Just like we cannot run a panel identically to somebody else because we are not them.
So what makes your panel special is you. So remember that next time you submit to a con and something similar ends up on the schedule, what's going to make your panel special is you and what you bring to it. So in the end, it doesn't really matter if someone else may or may not be doing something similar. Believe in yourself.
You got this.
Speaking of cons and panels, this one probably frustrates me even more is when someone thinks they own a convention, a judging spot, a guesting spot, or a competition. That they have the right to gatekeep those specific things.
The TLDR version is you don't.
You don't! But this happens a lot. This is more of the area where people get territorial, where they don't want others applying to guest or judge or compete because they don't want to lose their spot.
Well, and I've seen this at, you mentioned competitions. Some people that win a lot get extra pissy if new blood comes in because they don't necessarily want you to come in and do well because that's their coveted best in show, for example. Or on the flip side of that, they don't want you to come in and take away a spot from who they feel deserves it that's already in their circle. So maybe I think, as last year's Best in Show winner, that, you know, my friend Janice should get Best Masters. So I don't want you as a master level cosplayer coming in and taking Janice's award. How dare you steal that from her?
That situation grinds my gears because it's happened to us more times than I care to admit, where people get pissy because we're coming to a competition. It's like, you don't own this competition. You can't tell us we can't come because we're not part of your, like, cosplay circle in that area.
Well, and I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying before, like, do better.
Yeah. Just do better. That's kind of, because I used to care about that, where like, oh, but these people are there all the time, might get mad if we come and we win. No, I don't care anymore. Like, if we beat you, do better.
Right. And if you beat us, then we need to do better. Like, that's literally how contests work.
Yeah. Like, I don't care anymore.
Like, that is the whole point of a competition.
Yep.
Is there will be a winner. So if we don't score as high as we think that we should, then we need to do better. If you don't score as high as you think that you should, then you need to do better. Period.
Well,
the end.
It's the same with guesting and judging. I don't care if you've judged or guested for a con since it opened. Everyone has the right to apply. And if you get bumped out, ask why and see what you can change. Or maybe the con just decided they wanted something different.
Well, and as far as guests go, I'm always surprised whenever I see repeat guests, especially cosplay guests. Like, unless you legit are, like, right here and you, like, live here and you're, like, a local celebrity or something. I get that. But some people that, like, bring in the same people year after year, what's the draw to meeting the same person over and over again?
I've always wondered that, even with bigger cosplayers. Like, if they're at every con in the area, year after year after year, they're not going to be a draw anymore because everyone's already seen them.
We made that joke about Wisconsin.
Yes, Wisconsin does that a lot.
A couple years in a row, it seemed like they had the exact same people at every con, and we're like, well, I obviously only need to go to one of these if I care about any of these guests because they're all there.
Yeah, that was really strange. They legit had all the same, like, bigger name cosplay guests at every single Wisconsin convention that one year.
It was
It
really
was
weird.
really strange. But, we can't steal your spot. If you lose your spot, then you need to find out why. Because that's not how it works. You don't own that spot.
It's similar to what we've talked about in judging episodes previously. Go to your quote-unquote judges for feedback. Go to your departments, your guest relations, whatever, and say, hey, we've had this long-standing contract, and just see what they feel that you need to do differently in order to either A, get back in their good graces and get back on with their contract the following year, or if there's something that they think that you can do to improve yourself better for other shows in the future.
And I get that we probably sound a little harsh right now, but we're being honest with you all. I think you figured that out by now. That we'd rather be honest than sugarcoat it for you.
We don't mean like the snottily, like, well, we are going to come in and steal your spots. And we're like, not us specifically, but, you versus those other people that you're complaining about.
The colloquial we.
Yes, we're those other people that you're complaining about during this particular example. Not that we're, out for all your cosplay awards.
No, we don't
and your cosplay
purposely
spots.
pick conventions so we can take awards or guesting spots. It's just one of those where if I apply to a con and we get a guesting spot and someone just happened to have been doing that for 3 years, like, it's not against you. It's just business, basically. We can't steal that. So as you've seen, we can't steal most of these things.
Nope.
So, like, what do you do if you think someone stole something is probably the best question.
First, you check yourself, because is it something, A, that you actually own, and B, that they can actually steal?
Yeah, because most of the time it's not going to be something they can actually steal, as we have discussed.
We need a flowchart where it says, if yes,
So
then.
I need to make a flowchart. Was this stolen?
Maybe.
Do I own this?
Yes.
That could be a thing.
Okay, so if you legitimately own something, you're going to file a cease and desist.
Well, right.
That's going to be your actual legal, Now, if you want to be courteous before you do that, and before any of the actual legal fun stuff would start, you're probably going to reach out to them and attempt to have a conversation, to have a dialogue, to discuss the matter of what you own and what their usage of it is. Now, if that does not end amicably for both parties, and you do own trademark, copyright, etc., you're going to need to file a cease and desist, because part of owning something means that you have to protect it. So if you have a trademark on it, you need to protect your trademark or you lose it. They are very much use it or lose it. So that's not, let's pick and choose who we think should be able to go ahead and squeak under the radar with it. It's, did they steal it? If yes, get them to stop. If they don't stop, you need to file a cease and desist. And past that, if they still don't do it after the cease and desist, you need to talk to a lawyer.
Exactly.
Or you need to reevaluate your priorities, because if this is not important enough to you to protect, then why did you go to all the trouble of having a registered copyright or trademark on it? I mean, ask yourselves those questions.
Well, and you also have to ask, is what's happening even having a significant impact on your ability to enjoy cosplay? Because in most cases, it's not a business.
Most cases, it's not a business.
So,
and you don't own it.
Is this impacting you? Is it going to be worth the confrontation? What are you going to gain?
And don't go around, blasting people on the internet and fake booking. Because back to what Elle said in the beginning, we are all nerds in costume. And if you do something vicious in the community, people will remember you for that. They're not going to, if you're an asshole about it, they're not going to look at you as the victim, even if you are in that particular case.
I mean, let's
legally.
say you, because I've seen this multiple times, but, cosplayer A sees that somebody at another online convention is doing a My Hero Q&A, and so now they're blasting that person, when in reality that other person's never even heard of this cosplayer and had no idea that they had some famous My Hero Q&A panel.
Well, and frankly, it's My Hero and it's a Q&A.
I know.
So
again,
you don't own it.
The genericness.
Back to what Elle said earlier, like, you are what makes your panel. So if you do a My Hero Q&A panel as Deku in a very specific way, nobody else can do that the way that you do it.
No one else can
do the voodoo that you do.
No one else can be mom and son like we do.
That's also
That's very true.
Because nobody else is
exactly
us. Now, other people can do mom and son, but nobody else can do it like we do because they are not us. And we are not them.
So you have to consider, do the negatives outweigh the positives of having the conflict? Like, and you can tell someone, hey, by the way, I didn't like when you used this phrase that I used before for something, and I would like you not to use it. You can kindly ask something like that.
Don't be a dick.
Or, hey, I usually do this panel at that con. I saw you've also submitted it. Do you want to do it together?
Yeah, we've done that before. Collaborations. We've made new friends that way.
Have.
Hey, I noticed that you run this panel that's similar to this panel that we run. Do you want to just, do it together? And then for the extra panel slot that we've already reserved, we could run a different panel together. Ta-da! True story. It has happened.
And sometimes it's gone well and sometimes it hasn't, but it was the kind thing to do.
Well, and frankly, then for the attendees, they didn't have two of the same panel.
That too. Yes.
Not that it would be the same panel, because, again, different people, different panel. But they didn't have two of the same concept of panel.
Particularly when you submit to smaller conventions, it is more likely to get duplicates. That's when we've sometimes merged powers with someone else.
By our powers combined.
What do you do if someone comes to you out of the blue and is like, you stole my panel or my cosplay?
Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick first. Step 1, don't be a dick.
Step 3, profit. Oh, wait. We missed something
but really,
in there.
It's more consider what they're actually asking. Because you might have done something by accident. Are they, trying to find out more about your panel? Or are they really asking if you stole it? Because I've had that happen before, too. Where, they don't know how to just ask, what's your panel about? To see if it's similar. They just jump to, I think you stole my panel.
I think you stole my panel that you've never been to.
Right. So, it's good to think okay, well, how likely is it that I made this mistake? And I've had this accidentally happen before with phrases, for instance, not even thinking that someone may think of a certain phrase as ownership. And at times I've chosen to not use them again because it bothered somebody else. And to me, it just wasn't worth anything. Although we have on occasion also had phrases that we've used that people have tried to own where I'm like, no. No. Sorry. You can't.
Sorry, not sorry. You can't own that phrase.
So it really just depends more on what type of impact, again, would this have? If it really doesn't matter, just let it go. Just be like, oh, I'm sorry. I won't do that again. Because it's just not worth it in the end to cause that kind of upset. I'm sure this happens with tutorials too, where someone may come and say, I came up with that first. Before you respond, no, you didn't, blah, blah, blah. Google it. See if they actually did come up with it first before you attack back. Because your instinct is going to be, what? No, I put all this work into this. This isn't a copy.
How about not attacking back? That should be your first goal.
Well, right. Then you Google it and find out yes or no. And then, of course, you do have to consider, based on what they're asking, do they actually legally own this intellectual property? Yes? Stop it. No? Your choice.
Well, and I think part of it, too, is going to be, what exactly is this person who claims that you did something? What are they asking of you? Because some people will just contact you to complain.
Yes.
And they don't really want anything. They just want to kind of bitch about it. They want you to know that they know that you stole their idea from them.
They just want to make sure they put their stamp on it, just so you're aware that that's a thing that they feel they own. Which I see a lot in tutorials.
They might not actually be asking for anything. I have seen some people where they will have a similar tutorial to something that somebody else did, and they will credit 2 or 3 other tutorials like, hey, when I was developing this, these are things that I have learned from in the past that helped me, gain my knowledge base to be at this particular point. So here's my tutorial for this character, but I was inspired by techniques used in other tutorials for other things by XYZ people. I've seen that happen a lot.
I actually had that happen with our Princess Ladywig. Where somebody thought I had used their tutorial and I actually hadn't. And they were upset that I hadn't credited them. And I was like, I didn't use your tutorial. Because I used our friend Beverly's tutorial for that.
Right.
But this other person thought I had used their tutorial. And I was like, actually, I didn't credit you because I didn't use yours. I didn't know yours existed. Sorry. So sometimes it's also a complete misunderstanding that someone just assumes you had used their work when you didn't. I've had weird things like that before where, it's usually weird stuff that people contact you about. Like, oh, I used that kind of pose when I did that character for a photo shoot. So you're copying me.
But it's a super common pose that models use.
There's a reason I don't
that's one of my favorites.
Doing popular characters because that shit happens to me when I do.
Oh, I see that you copied this pose that I did that I copied from official artwork.
Right.
What?
It's like, what? What? As you can probably tell, most of this stuff, just ignore it because it's not worth responding to. Unless you care about that person, it's not worth responding to. So, if it's somebody you know, you're probably going to care more than if it's somebody you don't know. And 99% of the time, these kind of complaints come from people I don't know and therefore don't care as much about it.
Yeah, but, you do your diligence. You're like, did I accidentally do something that would cause this particular reaction? Yes, no, maybe,
And then you just move forward. If you don't care about it, get rid of it.
Like the phrase, I remember when one of those happened and we just, took it down. Like, who cares? It wasn't life-altering for us to not use a particular, sketch.
Yeah, we've had that happen with a couple of our sketches and stuff, and people have been like, I came up with that idea a long time ago, and I was like, oh, okay, and I didn't care enough, and I would just take them down.
Right.
And it was fine. I took them as they came, and some of them I was like, yeah, you're right, I'm gonna take that down. And it wasn't the end of the world. It was like, oh, yeah, okay, I can see where you're coming from.
Yes, this bothers you. Your friendship or your respect is worth more to me than this throwaway post,
It's the same with photos. If somebody, really has an issue with a photo or something, I'll take it down. That happened unintentionally. I accidentally cut someone out of a photo once when I was, cropping something, because I was doing, a friend post thing, and the other person, I didn't really know her. And a friend got upset about that. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I'm so sorry. And I took it down.
Right.
And then I put the original up and just put the rest post about the other people that were in the photo. Because I didn't even think about the fact that that may have been taken the wrong way. So I just fixed it. No big deal. I could have gotten really defensive about it and been like, I didn't mean that. No, I just took it down. Because it wasn't worth it. I'm like, okay, you have a point. I'm going to take it down. You can be wrong. I know.
Pearl clutching.
I know. I accept when I'm wrong because I make mistakes quite often and it's okay.
I mean, we're all human. It happens all the time.
Exactly, because you're going to make mistakes. Things are not going to always go as planned. You may accidentally steal something or something may accidentally come off the wrong way that you did not intend it to, especially over social media.
Especially anytime you type anything on the internet.
You're gonna misunderstand someone stealing from material from you. You're gonna get annoyed when you're pretty sure that someone's trying to copy your panel, but you're not quite sure. But it's not gonna be worth confronting them about it and trying to claim that they're stealing it.
Well, because frankly, if they weren't doing this particular panel, are you going to go do that particular panel in the exact same place to the exact same people that they were doing it? Probably not.
And as Ash mentioned before, don't go to social media and vague book. I hate I hate when people confront via vague book instead of just messaging me directly and going, "You effed up, fix it."
Yeah.
Like,
and don't send all your cronies.
No.
I mean, it's great that you have friends that are willing to stick up for you, but if you haven't had like a legitimate conversation with somebody, don't send the internet bullies after somebody for doing something if you think that they made a mistake. I mean, intention is a really big deal in this particular topic. So if somebody did something on accident, don't be a dick.
That's apparently the theme of this episode is, I should have actually named this episode Don't Be a Dick, I feel like. That seems to be the theme of this entire episode.
Don't be a Dick and Jane.
Don't be a dick. I mean, you're really not going to call someone out unless you've already tried these other avenues and it's still not working and you need to get their attention. And that's going to only be in the case of, like, you know, when companies steal fan art and put it on shirts.
Yeah, like, that's different. Because if it's really just, like, XYZ cosplayer, like, and you have an actual problem with them doing something with something you actually own, you are going to go through your lawyer, not through the internet trolls.
Because I think one of the big misconceptions is that a lot of people automatically assume that everyone's out to get you, and that is not going to typically be the case.
That is so not true.
Most people are not out to get you. Most people are not trying to rip off your stuff. So if you think that's happening, there's probably a reasonable explanation for it. So, like, try to talk to the person to find out what's going on.
Maybe you guys just happen to have a lot in common where you want to talk about the same things. You could ask them about their thought process and how they, you know, maybe make friends. That's a weird concept.
Like, you saw something you liked and you did your own spin on it, but you may want to check in with that person to make sure they're okay with that.
You really like to talk about wigs, and they really like to talk about wigs. Y'all could talk about wigs together.
That's how we end up with a lot of our panels with other people, is we're like, well, we're going to XCon, and you're going to XCon, and you like to do this panel, and we like to do this panel, so let's do this panel together.
Yes.
That's also how we've ended up with guests on the live show.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh, well, you're here. Why don't you join us?
Yep.
Come hang out with the crazy.
So if you happen to notice that we're at a con that you're going to be at and you want us to do a panel with you, if we're not busy, we probably will, because we like
We'll
to.
We'll come to your panel.
We'll sit and have shenanigans with you at the front of the room.
We'll sit in the audience. We'll sit right in the front row for you. We'll cheer you on the whole time.
Yes, we would also do that.
If you need our parental support that we give out for you while you do your panel, we will come to your panel and sit in the front row and cheer you on.
We will do that. We will sit with you and do panels with you. We will sit in a circle and sing Kumbaya. If you give us enough advance notice, we could probably even make signs.
We could. We did a panel like that once where we all sat in a circle.
We did.
And then we gave out presents.
It was a good time. Yes.
Because that was the gift exchange, wasn't it? Yeah, we did a whole panel that was the gift exchange game once. That was fun.
There were cookies and Christmas carols.
That's right. That was a good panel.
It was a good time. Everybody got free stuff.
That's right, they did.
All right, so moral of the story, make friends, don't be a dick. And you probably don't actually own that.
You probably don't.
But if you do, you should talk to your lawyer.
Right? Yeah, so if you do, talk to your lawyer. If you don't, suck it up, basically.
The end. Okay, well, I am still Ash, and I am still not a lawyer licensed in a state.
I am Elle, and I am also not a lawyer licensed in any state.
And we're Lovey Cosplay.
And this is Shit Cosplayers Say, Don't Be a Dick.
Dun dun.
Dun dun dun. Dun dun. You've been listening to Shit Cosplayers Say, an LVC production. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Podcast SCS. Our website is lavicosplay.com. Have a fun, crazy con or cosplay-related story, absurd cosplay question, or just something in general to share with us? Email us at podcastscs@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should.